Hey, and welcome to Off Balance with me, Arish Shah. This is the podcast where I take you through bite-sized chunks of knowledge that I've learned over the last 20 years operating as a CEO and CFO. You ready? Let's get to it. Finance is narrative over numbers. So as a finance guy, I'm obviously really interested in what the numbers have to say. But actually, I'm more interested in what you as a founder have to say to me about your numbers. Does your narrative, does your story match what the numbers are telling me? Now, a year or so ago, I looked at a pitch deck which had a valuation of $10 million. And ultimately, the founder was telling me that they would exit their business in 5 years for 5 times their EBITDA multiple. But the EBITDA that they had in their deck was about £50,000, which means that they would only have been able to exit the business for about £250,000. So it didn't make any sense. Their narrative just simply didn't match up to their numbers. It's really imperative that you make sure that whatever you're saying is gelling up with what your numbers are telling me as well. Now, this goes for whether you're talking to a bank or whether you're talking to an investor. I've been in loads of situations where I've been trying to show to a bank how we might be able to repay their loan over time. Now, if I were to put together a bunch of numbers that showed that really easily that we would be able to pay back a loan in 12 months, but the story of how we were going to do that didn't make sense, i.e. we needed more capital to buy more stock, or we needed to invest in more people to build more product, and those numbers just didn't add up with the story that I was telling them, I know that I would get a no from that bank pretty quickly. So it is imperative that the story that you're telling matches the numbers that you've put together, because ultimately people listen to stories. The numbers can often be a secondary thought. So whatever you do, make sure that your numbers and your narrative match up, and make sure that you spend a lot of time getting that narrative, that story in place so that you can talk to them efficiently about what your numbers are doing. Art more than science. So this one confuses a lot of people, and that's because they assume, correctly in some parts, that finance is all about numbers. But the reality is that whilst a lot of finance is around the numbers, it's also around contracts and narrative. And what I mean by that is when you are buying some equity or creating a derivative, really, the thing that underpins all of that is a contract. And contracts are conjured up, at least for the time being, by human minds. Maybe in the future, we'll have ChatGPT doing them, but let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet. And the thing about contracts is they can be worded in any number of ways. It really depends on who's writing the contract and who's signing the contract. And this is why finance is more art than science. It's about understanding how numbers flow and what people want, and then writing out contracts to achieve those goals. In fact, even accountancy is more art than science. As I'm fond of saying, accountants are the only people that can take 1 and 7 and make -55. And why is that? Because accounting is a set of rules that depends upon various functions of deferred revenue streams or timing differences, which mean that your cash never matches your profit and loss, which is very distinct from your balance sheet. And the reason that accountants are trained to do this is because it isn't science, it's art. There are rules and there are sort of regulations that you have to abide by, but there is some creativity in that as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't have issues as we've had with FTX as an example, where you have numbers that are written on a spreadsheet somewhere sitting off balance sheet and explained away in a missive to shareholders. So think about this the next time you're talking to your accountant or someone that you're fundraising from. Finance is more about the art than the science. It's all about communicating numbers, not just the numbers themselves. There we go. Hit me up in my DMs on LinkedIn or Twitter if you've got any questions. Otherwise, let's get back to building.